guess, Mark, you're up first, just talking about the EPASS program and opportunities on the horizon.
Okay. Thank you, Luke. Can everybody hear me okay? I'll make sure that this gets close enough to my lips. So good afternoon. Again, my name is Mark Klosterman. I am the Chief of EPASS. And basically the mission of EPASS is we provide all of the ANES support services across AFL-CMC, and we also include ANES support to headquarters AFMC and to AFPEO. On the order, if you want to look at the total number of positions across all of these organizations, it's about 5,700 CME positions that these contracts include. When you look at EPASS historically, we stood up the strategy back in 2013. We have successfully gone through our first round of task orders. So at the onset, AFL-CMC had on the order of over 300 dispersed ANES contracts. And strategically, AFL-CMC said, let's go to a best-in-class vehicle, which was GSA OASIS. So you just had the little session on category management, and so certainly GSA OASIS is a best-in-class. And so we leveraged that as part of our strategy. And so we consciously only go to the small business pools on OASIS. Currently, all of our awards have gone to the pools 1, 3, 5B, and 6. And so we started with over 300 contracts across the center. The first round, we brought that to a total of 38 task orders. And now we are going into the second round. So our first round task orders, generally speaking, are 5 years in period of performance, 1 base year and then 4 one-year options, typically speaking. And we will continue that same type of structure for round 2. Right now, a best practice that we've done from the inception of EPASS is on FedBiz Ops. Periodically, we will publish our TO phasing schedule. And so that is a mechanism for small business to understand all of the competitions coming down the pike, and that will allow you to align strategically with teaming partners on those competitions that you want to bid on. So other than that, that's really EPASS in a nutshell.
Okay. Brad, can you talk about as far as what OASIS is doing to help spend the small business community?
Sure. Can you hear me now? Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Brad Demers. I'm from the OASIS Program Management Office. And the question was, what is OASIS doing to help small business? I know small businesses tend to loathe the category management, and one of the reasons is OASIS, right? All of a sudden we have OASIS, everybody wants to use OASIS, and I don't have OASIS. And so OASIS is attempting to fix that, and one of the ways we're fixing it is through the on-ramp process, of course, and that's out right now. And between the on-ramp pools for pools 1, 3, and 4, and the OASIS 8A only, we were looking forward to that. We're going to have an OASIS 8A only vehicle that's out there right now. So between those two vehicles, we're adding near 500 awards. So that is a significant increase in the number of awards to small business under OASIS. So we're hoping that will diversify the pool. And as you know, a lot, or maybe you don't know, but under Pool 1, especially because it's a 15 million size standard, a lot of the contractors are going to be graduating from that. They're going to be representing themselves as other than small. And so that's why we are having this significant on-ramp. And another reason what we've done to help small business under OASIS, and I mean other small businesses, not just those that are on OASIS, but to help put dollars, to help diversify dollars to the small business. OASIS is doing very well as it relates to spend under OASIS. As it relates to small business, about half of the dollars are going to small business directly, And if you look at the robust subcontracting plan under OASIS Unrestricted, it's 50%. So if half the dollars are going to OASIS Small Business and 50% subcontracting plan, if the OASIS Unrestricted met their goals, that would be approximately 75% of the $16.2 billion that's been obligated so far under OASIS going to small business. So how are we helping to diversify this and get more small business contractors to be able to play under OASIS? So I just described that we're adding near 500 more. And another way, what we have done is we've adopted the similarly situated statute. To be specific, it's 15 USC 657, small s parentheses B. Can you say that 5 times?
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah.
No.
15 USC 657 SB, similarly situated entities. And so we have modified that into our contract. We've adopted that piece of the statute. It hasn't been promulgated to the FAR yet, but it is statutory. So we talked to our legal, we said, hey, let's help out small business and do this. What that statute does, what we have done under our contracts, is for the limitation of subcontracting, whenever you issue an order against OASIS Small Business, it is the limitation of subcontracting kicks in, meaning the contractor can only subcontract out 50% of their work. However, the similarly situated statute says if you subcontract your work to a similarly situated entity, in other words, if it's just an order for a small business, if you subcontract your work out to another small business, it doesn't count. So that's another way that we have helped small business. And anything else, as far as the ability to set aside within a set-aside, we've helped out socioeconomic small business, right? So socioeconomic categories in that way under the OASIS Small Business Program. In fact, task order number 45, right, was service-disabled veteran-owned set-aside. Yep, so that was set aside for service-disabled veteran-owned small business, so we allow that ability. And 8A is going to be, the 8A only subpool is going to be a boon. It's going to be outstanding. Even as it stands, even with all the challenges we've had with SBA, if you look at the data, under OASIS Small Business, about 26% of the work goes to 8A, even still today, even with the challenges that we've had under the program. So we're hoping that the 8A only small business subpool will be a success. We'll have the ability to do direct sole source 8A orders against it, and so that should help out our agencies during expiring fund season. By no means are we not promoting competition. Of course, in the government we always promote competition, but legally you can take advantage of sole source 8As at the order level, and we're enabling the program to do that.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. Now, I know, Phil, you're sitting in for Tom Kruzmark. Can you kind of just give just a brief description of what you do as an SBA PCR?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am an SBA PCR, and that PCR stands for Procurement Center Representative. Every major buying location across the federal government has a procurement center representative assigned to them, and we're there in an advisory capacity to assist the agency with their following the small business regulations and incorporating small businesses in their federal contracting programs, as well as we provide advocacy for individual small businesses and groups of small businesses. So one of the main things that we do that usually interests most people is that we review the acquisition or proposed contract while it's still in its planning phases. So this is before it's released as a solicitation. And we have that opportunity to affect the strategy. So we can, basically make recommendations to add small businesses to the bidders list, or to, set aside a small or a contract for small business, or one of our socioeconomic programs that we have. For the most part, that's that's one of the roles we play, and that's the vast majority of what I do on a day-by-day basis.
Thanks, Philip. I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and now open up the floor for questions.
Hi, my name's Angela Frenesta. I'm the president of BTAS, a local woman-owned business here in Dayton. So on EPASS, the procurement, the strategy for award is the HTRO. Can you talk a little bit about that?
HTRO. Do you know what HTRO is, Jesse? I was not expecting a question on that. I'm joking. I can assure you, you are not the first company we've talked to with questions on that, and absolutely. So I'm going to have some comments, and then I'm going to let Jesse add to these. So I was just talking to a company this morning about HTRO, and certainly, you know, a concern that they had is, oh, here you are, you know, your strategy is going to result in, you know, at the end, there's just going to be a handful of contractors that have been awarded all of the EPASS task orders. And I can tell you that is not the objective of that strategy. And so what I can assure you is at the heart of HTRO, highest technically rated offerer, that is really what we're after. I'm going to take you back historically. So when we started EPASS, you know, in 2013, and we started, you know, going through our initial set of competitions, so we were a blend of FAR Part 15 and FAR 16 principles. And part of that was, you know, I'm sure a number of you have submitted proposals under that round one, in which it was technically acceptable. So we were doing a technical evaluation to make sure your proposals were technically acceptable. And then it went into the cost price evaluation, which we called, you know, it was the total, you know, lowest total evaluated price, okay? So LTEP. And no matter how you want to look at it, that was on the LPTA spectrum, okay? So it was LPTA at its core. And so it was interesting going to the GSA OASIS PMRs, for example, as well as, you know, many conversations with other companies. They're like, you know what? As long as you're LPTA, we're not going to bid. And I'm like, I don't get it. Why? And the response was, look, I have a highly qualified and educated workforce that my company can provide to your organizations, but we can't do it under the lowest price. So we're choosing not to bid. So that in itself was a problem. So companies were choosing not to bid because of the lowest price. And then the congressional language came out in 2017, which explained that LPTA was not appropriate for professional services. And so we went then in search of another methodology. And so what we came across, you know, in all of our research was HTRO. So that's what led us to HTRO. You know, GSA OASIS used HTRO to establish and set up the pools, for example, as well as other, you know, government agencies have used this. So HTRO is not something that EPASS invented. We are simply leveraging something that has already been used throughout the government.
I appreciate that, but what do you see as the consequences to small business as a result of the HTRO?
What I'm expecting is increased competition and bringing the highest technically rated offer to the surface. That'll bring the best people to our PEOs, to our organizations.
Okay, so I'm on the panel after you, and it's about small business opportunities. Under the HTRO structure, can you talk about the number of small businesses that you can have against that rating, which is really what is key, right, for the award?
So
I believe you can only have 2 small businesses essentially as a subcontractor. Originally, under the previous solicitations, if you had a subcontractor, you were actually decremented points. And I think there was an amendment, so now we can have like 2. But that still will have an impact because the winning team presumably will be of 3 contractors. And when you take 300 contracts and you reduce it in the first round to 38, in the second round, how many contract awards do you anticipate?
So you will see that in the TO phasing that we release out on FedBiz Ops. So it's 27.
So if I can address the concern about the small business consequence and the question asked about having 2 subcontractors. For the purposes, every one of these kind of stands on its own. We take the responses from industry, and we do tailor the acquisition to meet the requirements of our mission partners. That said, we are really asking for, in the majority of these, 5 work samples that the contractors self-score against. So we're not in execution necessarily limiting kind of the options here, but for purposes of the teaming arrangement to choose that highest technically rated offerer, we could even, if we got a response from industry on a specific solicitation and we dispositioned and we said, okay, you can have four team members and you submitted essentially 5 work samples, it would still be incumbent on the company to provide the work samples to maximize the score to become that highest technically rated offer. So I'm not sure that opening it up beyond 2, and we haven't seen this comment a lot, would help anybody because you're still then having to select which work samples you use. And we do want to see that as a prime contractor, you are the one ultimately responsible for the work, you're responsible for the teaming arrangement, and for managing everything about that task order. So we could potentially open it up if we got that response and the task order was right for it, but we're still only holding you to 5 work samples, so I don't know what benefit that would be.
So if I could, let me just add to that. So then, Jesse talked to the communication, and so that is the one thing that we really need the industry, partners to do, and that is we give the opportunity to industry to give us feedback, in the forms of we send out RFIs, the draft RFPs, industry day, please give us these feedback, and I believe that we've shown evidence that we do listen. We don't take action on every comment. We can't do that because one company finds one comment favorable and another would find it unfavorable. So we are looking at every comment, we look at it critically, and there is evidence that we do listen. There's been changes. If you look at the solicitations, we've awarded 5 so far, and if you look at even the solicitations that are out on the street, I think you'll see evidence where if you look at the very first one that was sent out, there's been changes.
However, I did ask about the impact of small business and really definite contracts down to 27. Do you see an impact to the small business industrial base here or for LCID?
So, go ahead and let her express it. That way it's accurate.
Last question. When you go from 300 contracts down to 27 contracts, I'd asked you about the consequence to the small business industrial base. Can you talk about that, please?
So certainly from a center standpoint, so our strategy is based upon category management, and as part of that strategy, it is consolidation. And so from a government standpoint, that is why we've employed that strategy, is the further we can consolidate, we have all of the advantages that category management brings to the table. And so that is the foundation of the EPASS strategy. Will it have impacts? When you talk about 300 small contracts that were out there, those are 300 opportunities, for a company to prime. versus now it's 38 and then eventually 27. Yes, I mean, so there's less opportunity to prime. I acknowledge that.
But you're still seeing opportunities for subcontracting, aren't you, Mark?
Absolutely. There's, the teaming agreements are out there. The work, the dollar value is still there, and it's 100% small business. I mean, when you look at the 300 contracts that were out there that were consolidated, there was quite a few that were large business. So in this translation, from 300 to the 38, we actually increased significantly the number of dollars that went to small business. So that is one benefit that small businesses had in this consolidation.
If I could add one thing, if you don't mind. One of the things that we've seen with the success of EPASS is a lot of services now coming over to us that were initially captured under a product-based support. So we're actually adding work to the industrial base of the small business in the area, because that's no longer being done by some of these OEMs. We're breaking that apart where it makes sense, and we're bringing it in.
Mark, can you talk about, as far as small businesses, how they can communicate with you? Can they schedule meetings?
Absolutely. So Jake Coons, our Chief of Contracts, and myself, we make ourselves available, whenever anyone wants us. So certainly, all you need to do is reach out to us, and we will make the time available. And like I said, this morning, we met with the company. So you always have that opportunity, and like I said earlier, take advantage of the opportunities to provide feedback on the RFIs, the industry days, and also the draft RFPs. And this is, I'll give you the kudos here, Luke. We are planning a town hall meeting to invite, all of the contractors from GSA Oasis and the small business pools to come and participate. It'll probably be in the August timeframe, and certainly I have no doubt HTRO will be, at the heart of the conversation. We also want to share lessons learned, as far as the proposals that we're seeing, and hopefully, provide some lessons learned to you all that will help you increase the quality of your proposals. So we want to have that type of information exchange with you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Mark. Is that, yeah.
There, I
Dan
got
Rapp from MCR. You may be tired of hearing this, but I'm going to bring it up. I've participated in nearly every one-on-one session and brought this topic up and typically get head nods. But your criteria in all but one of the since December, EPASS, HTRO structures limits work samples to prime work only for team members. And many of them limit it to prime work only across the board for both the prime offer and the subcon and the team member. Since a work sample can be very large and very viable and show technical capability and management as a subcontractor, and it will be performed by the team member as a subcontractor, why is it limited? Why is it restricted to only prime work? And I'm going to caveat that by saying when you talk about growing the small business base, many small businesses have small work samples or subcontract work that doesn't allow them to be a viable team member mathematically. And because of that, even if they're put on a team post-award, it's only sub work. It limits any ability to graduate to a prime offerer status through the life of EPASS and using EPASS. So back to the original question, why the limitation on subcontract work in work samples? We saw some and then it all disappeared.
So when we originally made the call to go to that, we also incorporated CPARs as part of the technical criteria. Now, In a very recent solicitation, we did open that back up to allow just what you said. So I don't know that it's a blanket thing. We are listening and we are changing. It depends entirely on the mission that we're trying to focus on here and what it is our mission partners are really looking for. A work sample is great, but if I don't have a way to measure the success of that work sample against some kind of rating or something like that, I don't, as a contracts person, I can't go, all right, that's a quality work sample. Well, if that subcontractor wasn't performing, or if you as a prime weren't performing well in that subcontractor and were terminated by your team member, I would have no way of knowing any of that, and that's not a quality product for me to evaluate against.
I agree with you. The part of it, to make sure these are quality samples, and that's a difficult position for you to be in. But the response to say no sub work for team members just locks out a lot of folks.
But we haven't said no, and respectfully, sir, we haven't done that. And the one that we have out on the street right now specifically does allow for that.
Yeah, there is one, and I did mention that. There is one, but the others have been very specific that it's only prime work. I'm just bringing this up because it is a common thread amongst many of us that it keeps us out of supporting competitive proposals.
So my question is, have you provided that feedback on the draft RFPs?
On every one,
Okay,
as well as on the one-on-ones. And typically, it's met with head nods and concurrence. That
Okay.
sounds right.
okay.
Well, you've made some changes to it, but it's something we can address in the town hall too.
Oh, absolutely. And like Jesse said, we learned from every one of our competitions. And so you can see that there was a change made with this latest one. And so we will see how that competition plays out. And that certainly will have, the effects on the later ones.
Can you give a little bit more details on the on-ramps, Brad, as far as GSA, Oasis? I know right now.
I can give you the website. I'm sorry. I can't really give you details on the on-ramps as it relates to, I know I spoke to some gentlemen at lunch, and I see some of the questions they have here. I don't know if they're going to ask them or not. They can, but I can't really answer them because they're specifically related to the RFP that's active right now, and I cannot answer that. And if anybody hasn't, you can go to the GAO docket, and you can type in the solicitation number. So we've, as of yesterday, we've received 2 solicitation protests. Of course, I can't discuss those at all, but that's something to keep in mind. And one question I can answer is, as of right now that I know of, we are not going to extend the closing date for both the 8A solicitation or the Oasis Pool 1, 3, and 4 solicitation, and it closes on June 26th. But that's what I know today, and I have no idea whether that will change tomorrow, but as far as I know, that will not change. And there was a previous protest on it that has been, a decision was decided on that. A decision was decided. It was decided by GAO February 15th. If you Google GSA, GAOE, CAGRA, if you Google that, you will find that case, and you can read all about that. But other than that, we are on time to close on the 26th. In fact, I just got an email this morning about source selection teams. If anybody's familiar, we have a new software that we're using called Symphony, and it's organizing all the proposals. And I'm going to be on a source selection team, allegedly, to review all those. And so it should go quicker. So we're hoping that this will be done a lot quicker because we have a robust tool to house all the offers in and process all these offers. Any questions?
Hello.
June 27th. I'm kidding. No, that is, the anticipated award date is as soon as possible. I don't know if anybody remembers, but inside we reserved the right, I don't know if we're going to exercise this right or not, but we reserved the right to award in rolling 40s, or however many we see fit. I believe the solicitation language is open to allow us to do rolling awards. For example, Pool 1, we're adding 190 as an example, and we may be able to, the solicitation allows us to award the first 40, for example. And I know, what is it? I think it was, I was talking to a contractor the other day about another contracting program where they have done this, because some of the questions surrounding that are, okay, if you do this rolling awards, are you going to have rolling protest periods, right? How do you handle that? You know, you weren't on the first 40, or we can't really tell you, well, you're on the next 40, right? So don't protest yet. Well, we can't really say that. And so some of these other programs have handled it that way because technically you haven't been notified that you haven't received an award. We would only notify those who didn't meet some minimum criteria, right? So those people, of course, are eligible to file a protest. So that's something, it's a tool we can use to get the awards done quickly. Because come October 20th, that's when the existing Pool 1 contractors have to re-represent their size. And we expect a majority of them, due to the success of the program, to be graduating. Yes, sir.
I've got a question about category management. So, category management with OASIS, is the way I see it, is based on NAICS codes. And the problem with that is the fact that if I'm a small business in Pool 1, my NAICS code is a 1611 or a 1330, I'm good for a while in that situation. But if I wanted to be able to lateral, and I've done well, and we're big enough to grow out of this, or have to grow out of this, I can't lateral to a Pool 4, 5, or 6, because those NAICS codes don't exist in those pools. And therefore, I'm lost as a small business. I'm stopped from using OASIS again because I don't have the quals and the work that I did. And a lot of these companies who come in Pool 1 are starting out, and that's all they can do because they don't have a lot of contracts and so forth to do that. So category management really doesn't help them a lot if you're in that situation. There's not a logical movement from any one particular pool to others. Obviously 2 and 3 have those same NAICS codes in them, but 4, 5, and 6 are all different. Those are the ones where all the dollars are, and particularly 5 and 6, I have a lot of dollars going through that. They want to get to that big size and be able to do that. How do we do it? It kills the small businesses in that situation, potentially.
Yeah, let me answer that. And that's not really category management. The reason OASIS was set up that way is due to size standards. Each pool is separated by size standard. So all the pools have different NAICS codes due to size standards. And Pool 1 has the most NAICS codes because that has the most NAICS codes with the same. We tried to capture all of the 5400 series NAICS codes, the professional services category, right? Most all the 5400 series NAICS codes. Pool 1 has 21 different NAICS codes. All of those NAICS codes have one thing in common. They are all a $15 million size standard. You go to Pool 3, that is the same NAICS code, but it has the exceptions that an SBA set those exceptions. It has nothing to do with the category. That happens to do purely with the NAICS codes and the size standards that SBA set up. And yes, in order to go into another pool, whether you lateral or whether for pool 4 you come in through the open solicitation, you have to be able to show that you've done work in that area. And it's a different area because it's a different NAICS code. And so that is why. So in your particular situation, while you can't lateral over with a new teaming arrangement, you can propose on the new on-ramp for Pool 4, which is out there right now, and you can come in with one of your team members. For example, if you were the prime and you didn't have the pool qualifications, but your team member does, your first-tier subcontractor team member, then you could get in. And that was one of the major changes we had to make to the evaluation criteria to OASIS, was to enable the 15 USC 644 little q statute. We had to allow that, which is we had to allow offers from either joint ventures or prime subcontractor teaming arrangements. And a lot of people might ask, I'm going to ask myself a question if that's okay. So the question is, okay, Brad, why don't you relax the evaluation criteria to allow more small business, such as the gentleman who asked, why don't you relax the criteria, maybe, reduce the pool qualifications to maybe one project, reduce the, change the point scheme to relax it for small businesses. And the reason we cannot do that is on-ramping is unique, right? It's a new concept in the government to on-ramp from existing contracts. And we get that authority from Section H15 of the contract. Section H15 of the contract states that we cannot change any of the evaluation criteria so that there's an even playing field. And so then the question is, well, why did you allow these contractor teaming arrangements? That's a significant change. There's another one-liner in the contract that says the on-ramp solicitations will be issued in accordance with current procurement law. And because of that, that statute, 15 USC 644 little q, because of that statute, we had to then allow contractor team arrangements to come in. So if you can't make the points yourself, or if you can't make the minimum qualifications yourself, you now can team with someone who can. And you can do this either via a joint venture or a prime subcontractor teaming arrangement, or we allow large businesses to come in through a large business mentor protege. You can come in and do that. But because we didn't want all the top slots going to large business mentor protege joint venture, we limited, it was protested, we limited the number of projects the large business mentor could provide to make the points, and we did win that piece. That was one of the pieces of the ECOGRA solicitation protest I told you about. And so that is why we cannot relax the evaluation criteria. And certainly, when we go out with I'm calling it O2, sound great, O2, oxygen, OASIS 2, certainly we welcome feedback when we begin communication on that, and we're going to have to do that pretty soon. Thank you for the question.
Good afternoon. Andrew Martin from Apogee. My question is for EPASS related to NAICS. Can you talk a little bit about the determination of the NAICS and whether it is EPASS or the program office that is the customer that drives that decision?
Certainly, and then we look at the preponderance of the work being performed. So when we put out the requirements to to our mission partners, we have them populate an LOE matrix. That level of effort matrix is now showing us what the positions that they're looking to kind of fill are. What is that CME skill level? And then we take that CME, that LOE matrix with the CMEs, and we look really what is kind of the heart of the work. If it's primarily engineering, we're going to be driven over to the engineering NAICS code over in Pool 6. If we're talking a lot of program management, if we're talking a lot of administration functions, and we're looking more towards Pool 1. It's completely driven by the mission itself.
So with that in mind, you know, a lot of the opportunities seem to be either going Pool 3 or Pool 6. How do you make that distinction on what a science and technology or an R&D position is versus an engineering?
So when we look at it, we talk very heavily with the subject matter experts that are housed within our mission partners, and we rely on them to make the distinction. Truly, what is your requirement? Are we looking for an ABET accredited engineer in accordance with AFL-CMC engineering policy, or are we looking over here to add an instructor or to teach something? We rely pretty much on the subject matters experts who are giving us those requirements.
I wanted to reiterate, if you Google GAO NAICS study, you will find that the government is given wide latitude in its determination, and they go through the process as Jesse just described. Unless something is completely out of whack, somebody's buying basketballs and they're calling it R&D, the chances of winning a NAICS appeal are actually pretty slim. If you look at that GAO NAICS study and you see that, you'll see that most NAICS appeals are denied because the government is given wide latitude, because it is a subjective decision, but it's based on looking, and that's what I do as a contracting officer. I go and I look and see what the principal purpose of the work is, and principal purpose is really what drives it. It's not always the labor, it's not always the dollar value. For example, we can do prototypes under OASIS, and prototypes requires that the dollar value is in the metal, right? You need the brains to make the prototype, but the dollar value is in the metal. And that doesn't mean that it's a manufacturing NAICS code suddenly because the dollar value is in the metal. Choosing a NAICS code is not always cut and dry. It's driven by the principal purpose. It might be driven by the labor mix, maybe. That might be a deciding factor, but generally speaking, it is driven by what's the principal purpose of this requirement, and it's not always the dollar value. It's not always the dollar value. It's principal purpose. That's the driving factor.
And if I can add one other thing here, the EPASS office, and I would say everybody in AFL-CMC, we work very closely with our small business offices and our representatives. When we go through, we have to submit paperwork to them. They review the PWSs, and they are looking at that very heavily and making sure that they believe that we are right in the CO determination, that we have chosen that right NAICS code. And if there's a disagreement, we have conversation and dialogue about it before we go out without any solicitations.
We also take meetings with all small businesses and listen to your concerns and then pass them on to the EPASS office. I know, Mark, you talked about the town hall. Do you anticipate a date in the next couple months, next month, or?
So we're looking at August.
Okay, the August timeframe.
And I can add that we're going to put out a call asking for questions, topics in advance, things that the small business partners want to see discussed before we actually sit down in the meeting. We're going to, similar to an RFI, we're going to put something out to the pools and say, hey, everybody's going to be invited. Tell us what you want to hear about.
I think we may have time for one last question.
Yeah, Gary Plum. I'd like to thank you. First of all, I think you have been listening to inputs, and we've seen some changes from the draft RFPs to the RFPs. I think you've come a long way. Some of the initial RFPs were basically asking in 5 different ways, do you have a large contract? And then they asked that question 5 times in succession. But But I think you're spreading it out now, adding more criteria. We should see scores spread out, I think. Hopefully we'll never see another tie where a name has to be pulled out of a hat. So I think you have been listening. I appreciate that. When you do make changes, it would be very appreciated if you could release another draft RFP, because this new paradigm of HTRO, the teaming process, as limited as it may be, we don't have much time, and a small change in scoring criteria can make a difference, a substantive difference in the score that you may get. And so teaming, there's a lot of scrambling going on, in the last second. So I think we had some here recently where we had draft RFP language that came out and then a significantly different RFP. And again, I applaud the changes that came out of the RFP, but for those that are trying to get onto teams or form teams, we need some more time. I mean, even if it's just a couple weeks, I know there's a schedule to be held, but it would really be nice for your industry side of this to give us some time to be able to team once that criteria is really getting zeroed down versus coming out with an RFP that looks new and has different criteria. So that'd be the first request. The second one, I think it's a truism. If you ask any customer, is it important to you that your staff is stable and happy and, most likely going to be retained in their position and continue to grow their corporate knowledge for mission execution? And, if you agree with that, then I think it would be, your responsibility to include some kind of scoring criteria that scores that. Now, asking for retention, histories and whatnot are sometimes hard to do and hard to prove and hard to track. But one of the things we've suggested is, you could look at DCA or DCMA records to see what is a fringe to base, and you get a good feel right off the bat of how well are these companies taking care of these important, incumbent people that are, providing the real brains to the work. Is the managing company taking care of them? You can get a very quick look into that if you look at their fringe rates, but I've never seen that as a scoring criteria yet. And so that's puzzling because I know that from all the different customers I've talked to, that's a very important thing to them. So if you can think about those things, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't think this has been fair, Luke, because we've answered all of the questions here, but someone hasn't answered a question yet. Come on, ask a question to SBA.
Anybody got an SBA question?
Where's Tom Kruzmark at?
Tom Kruzmark, he's the PCR for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I cover the rest of Ohio. Tom Kruzmark is on vacation in Hawaii. Therefore, I'm here ready to, assist you with all of my inexperience with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But if you have any SBA questions about, maybe what are we doing in this, in the OASIS environment, please feel free to ask.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you guys for your time.
We got one?
Hi. So I'm a government contracting officer, but I'm currently participating in the Education with Industry program. And I'm sitting embedded in a industry contracting office that's preparing proposals every day. So I'm having to feel the pain on your side of the fence. The particular contractor I'm sitting with is attempting to on-ramp OASIS. And so my question for the small business wrap up there is, how much do you look at the actual solicitations, and is anyone sticking up for small business or even large businesses, because we're not all that large, when it comes to the difficulty in responding to the solicitation? I'm hearing from business partners that responding to an OASIS, and I'm assuming EPASS is similar, I'm not very familiar with EPASS, but we're talking on orders of magnitude of 1 to 2 man-years worth of work. We're talking about hiring consultants that are $50,000 to $100,000 to respond to the solicitation. So how much, if any, feedback does the SBA give to just the ease of proposing?
SBA does play a role in this. We are looking at the solicitations. One of the things is that the GSA is marketing OASIS as a best of the best kind of product for contracting offices to use to meet their individual requirements. So we don't have a lot of say in how they structure their solicitation. They're the ones who define their requirements. But there are some things, there's at least 3 things that I know SBA is doing when we're talking about the OASIS. And the first one is a lot of our regulations that we have in place foster small business participation. So I know Brad talked about on-ramping and off-ramping. Well, that's in the SBA regulations that, we're going to encourage that to happen. I mean, on-ramping brings new small businesses into the fold, where off-ramping gets the ones who are no longer small businesses off of it. So that's a regulatory change that SBA has in place. We also we have new programs. The All Small Mentor Protege program is a new one. And it kind of supplements the 8A Mentor Protege program. And under these programs, a small business can make a teaming arrangement with another small business or even with a large business and create a joint venture, which can then qualify as a small business to quote on these contracts. So the areas that you might not be strong in, some of the things you mentioned, you can be supplemented with a I almost said large mentor, but it doesn't have to be a large mentor. But get another small business mentor, but the mentor can assist in those things. We're always looking for robust subcontracting as well. And as Brad mentioned, a 50% subcontracting goal, that's pretty robust. 50% to small business. Our PCRs, we look at these, we're making sure that before the contract awards are made, that the small business plans are adequate, that they're acceptable, and we provide our advice before the contracting officer makes that award decision. So that's some of the things we're doing. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but if you want to ask more questions, I'll be available after this.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, guys. I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and get ready for the next panel.